has always been linked to sex. Throughout Hollywood's lurid history, the name Clara Bow has always been linked to sex. Her alluring features, hourglass figure, and restless spirit made Clara the leading sex symbol of the 1920s. By the age of 21, Clara Bow is known as the It Girl, because this girl had it all. But this fickle town called Hollywood often destroys the very icons it creates. Clara Bow is no exception. A naive girl from Brooklyn turned movie star, sex siren. It was just a matter of time before the image was shattered, and so was the woman. On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll expose the shocking rumors and accusations that tormented this sexy starlet.
Clara Bow has slept with women, koala bears, had sex in public, and slept with her Great Dane.
And we'll hear about Clara's sexual exploits from acclaimed screenwriter and novelist Bud Schulberg.
She had some good and bad boyfriends, a lot of bad boyfriends.
We'll also reveal what made Clara so seductive and bewitching.
Clara Bow had it. And I'm not fooling, she did.
And we'll identify the tragic events that led to Clara's sad and lonely end.
She was so damaged by the time she arrived in Hollywood that nothing could have saved her.
I'm A.J. Benza. Join me as we taste the success, the sins, and the suffering of Hollywood's It Girl, Clara Bow. Clara Bow was born in the slums of Brooklyn, New York on July 29, 1905. Clara's childhood was a nightmare. How bad was it? Her father, Robert, was AWOL most of the time, and according to biographer David Sten, Clara's mother, Sarah, was a prostitute who had no regard for her daughter's well-being.
She would bring men home. Clara Bow was 4 years old. She would lock her in a cabinet, and Clara Bow would sit there crouched in a little cabinet while her mother paid the rent. And it was heartbreaking later because she would brag to her friends that she had more uncles than any of them, because her mother would always introduce these tricks as uncles.
USC theater professor Paul Backer says that Clara spent her sad youth dreaming of becoming a star.
Clara Bow loved the movies, and she read a lot of the famous movie screen magazines, and she heard about this contest called the Fame and Fortune Contest.
She was always very careful to point out that it wasn't a beauty contest. It was sponsored by a publisher of fan magazines.
The contest required 15-year-old Clara to complete an entry form and attach a photograph of herself.
She had no money for a picture to enter the contest. Her father loaned her $1, for which she was eternally grateful. She won. She beat everyone else. No one was more surprised than she was. The contest winner was given a part in a movie. And so she got a bit part.
Most of Clara's performance in the 1922 film Beyond the Rainbow was left on the cutting room floor. But 16-year-old Clara was hooked on Hollywood. Her mother, Sarah Bow, was violently opposed to her daughter's new profession. Writer Rudy Belmer was the last person to interview Clara Bow.
Clara woke up in the middle of the night and saw her mother standing over her with a butcher knife.
Now, get this. Apparently Sarah, the mother who turned tricks in front of her daughter, felt that Hollywood was a bad influence. See, Mama thought it was her duty to murder her daughter before she made another film. Obviously, this woman was completely nuts and was locked up in the nearest insane asylum.
After her mother was committed to a public mental institution in Brooklyn, Clara Bow's father raped her.
Can this story get any worse? Yeah. In 1923, 1 year after she was institutionalized, Clara's mother died. Clara's father, Robert, was the only family 17-year-old Clara had left. Despite his sexual abuse, she always felt bound to her father.
It's a classic pattern for a sexually abused child, is you just keep seeking love from the abusive parent. And he raped her, and it makes you wonder why she would stay so loyal to him. She was too loyal, and she was constantly taken advantage of.
Despite Clara's personal problems, the aspiring actress caught the attention of acclaimed movie producer B.P. Schulberg. His son is the Oscar-winning screenwriter Bud Schulberg.
When my father, B.P. Schulberg, told me about her, he said that when he first saw Clara, he was struck not only by the fact that she was a very, very pretty girl, but that she had some kind of a spirit coming out of her, a sort of intangible magnetism that came across on the screen. The camera that loved Clara Bow.
Actress Anita Page remembers Clara Bow.
just seeing and being with her was wonderful. I loved her and thought she was lovely, and she was. And I'm lovely, too.
18-year-old Clara moved from Brooklyn to Beverly Hills, and her star began to rise. Over the course of 3 years, Clara starred in 34 films. She was the top box office draw and a celebrated symbol of the times.
When you think of the flapper and the girl who drank bathtub gin and drove in an open roadster and lived a little too fast and too hard, that was her.
The 1920s, which was the heyday of Clara's career, was called the Jazz Age or the Roaring Twenties.
There was a sense of the Roaring Twenties being a decade that was out of control in a lot of ways, and the woman who ran the wildest and the boldest and the most out of control was definitely Clara Bow. She embodied her era.
In 1926, 21-year-old Clara won the lead in the silent classic Wings.
It was a very expensive movie to produce, grand epic, and it won the first Academy Award, not only for Paramount Pictures, but it was the first Academy Award ever for Best Film.
A.C. Lyles is a producer for Paramount Pictures. He's worked on the studio lot for more than 60 years.
Wings made Clara Bow a big star, and also there was a man in it, a young actor, that had one scene. His name was Gary Cooper, and he became the biggest star on the lot.
Clara's interest in the handsome Gary Cooper made him the toast of Hollywood and the envy of every American man.
She fell in love with him, and then, meanwhile, she was also in love with Victor Fleming, her director from Mantrap, and she was engaged to them at the same time. Of course, that was great copy, but it also started a backlash because everyone knew what engagement was a euphemism for. And there were writers saying things such as, Clara's engagements last as long as the average girl's headaches.
When she was 21, Clara met trashy romance novelist Eleanor Glynn, the Jackie Collins of her day. Eleanor had just written a sinful tale called It.
Eleanor Glynn had a celebrated meeting with Clara Bow in which she said, "My dear, you have it," which was the word for sex in the 20s.
People, they say, what was it? Well, it was animal magnetism. It was sex. And she was a sex symbol, but this was an era when people didn't use that word. And suddenly this young 21-year-old girl comes along and throws sex in your face. And you can't say that, so you say she has it. And you say that's the it girl.
The novel It was turned into a movie starring Clara Bow. This once troubled kid from Brooklyn was living an almost fairy tale existence. But would the ghost from Clara's past come back to haunt her? Coming up, what public accusations left Clara humiliated and betrayed? And how did Clara's lust for life invite rumors of a shocking sex scandal? In 1926, screen diva Clara Bow starred in a romantic comedy titled It. The film provided 21-year-old Clara with her most famous role and forever branded her as the It Girl. Her sultry bedroom eyes and provocative smile thrilled moviegoers and drove the boys wild.
When you describe what a big star is today, there's no comparison with what a star was then, because there was no television. Everyone went to the movies.
Clara Bow, in all of her popularity and all of her success, also had a sort of a sad life.
Sad is right. As soon as Clara reached the heights of stardom, her troubled past caught up with her in L.A.
When Clara became famous in Hollywood, her father came out and pretty much lived off of Clara's earnings.
Well, look at him. He'd already raped her. He was chasing after every extra girl in Hollywood, trading on her name, saying, "I'm Clara Bow's father." And he was patronizing whorehouses.
That father was a real good-for-nothing. I remember Robert Bow was always about fussing for more money, a job. They were trying to help him, give him money, setting up some business. He was sort of a pain in the neck.
Clara's father wasn't the only one taking advantage of her. The producers at Paramount were also quick to capitalize on Clara's fame.
You had an ironic and ultimately very destructive situation where the studio just kept putting her in one mediocre movie after another.
Clara Bow would be working 16-hour days, 18-hour days, 20-hour days, whatever it took.
It took a health crisis to get Clara off the set. In 1928, severe stomach pains forced the 22-year-old to undergo an emergency appendectomy. Clara's attending physician was William Earl Pearson. Pearson's son, Bill, recalls his father's first encounter with the young star.
She was a patient in the hospital, and he was an intern.
She fell in love with him. He was married, And even Clara Bow made clear she didn't chase married men, but he said he was estranged from his wife and that they were getting a divorce, and she believed him.
But to Clara's surprise, Pearson hadn't mentioned his divorce plans to his wife. Mrs. Pearson traveled from their Texas home to visit her husband in L.A.
My mother had gone out there on the train to sing. And when she got off the train, well, he had this car that she knew that he couldn't afford on an intern's pay, you know.
Well, one guessed where he got the money. After a little digging, Pearson's wife learned her husband's lover was none other than the famous Clara Bow. Mrs. Pearson was determined to make Clara pay.
Mrs. Pearson went to Paramount and said, I am going to sue my husband for divorce and name Clara Bow as co-respondent unless you pay me $150,000.
The execs at Paramount didn't want any bad publicity to tarnish the image of 23-year-old Clara Bow, so the studio convinced Clara to send Pearson back to his wife. Clara also had to pay Mrs. Pearson $30 grand to keep her quiet about the affair.
Once again, Clara Bow was victimized by someone else.
Clara's producer at Paramount, B.P. Schulberg, felt it was time for damage control.
Clara's life was a shambles, and things were not being managed properly, and people were taking advantage of her. Daisy DeVoe, who had been a hairdresser at Paramount, B.B. Schulberg made an offer to Daisy to straighten out Clara's life and be, you know, her secretary and companion and run the household and what have you. And so she left the employ of Paramount and went to work for Clara Bow.
Clara's kind nature bordered on gullibility. She and her new employee, Daisy, became fast friends. Sadly for Clara, this was just one more relationship that would end in heartache. Clara's son, Rex Bell, explains.
Daisy was taking money from Mother. I don't remember how much, but somewhere, she had supposedly embezzled somewhere around the amount of $40,000, which was a lot of money then.
After almost 2 years of service, 25-year-old Clara accused Daisy of stealing from her. DeVoe insisted she had done no wrong, but Clara didn't buy it.
Suddenly, the spat between best friends became a criminal case, and Daisy DeVoe was on trial, and Daisy DeVoe decided that the best defense was a malicious offense.
Daisy then started telling tales in court and to the papers and so forth about Clara's behavior. And there, all kinds of private things came out.
Clara Bow had already endured scandal, but there was no way to prepare for what was coming next. In the 1931 trial, Daisy DeVoe was determined to ruin the young movie star's career by airing Clara's dirty laundry. When we come back, what ugly accusations would Daisy make on the stand? Was there any truth to these shameful allegations? And would Clara's devoted fans turn against her when she needed them most? She was once the highest-paid actress in silent film and a host of forbidden Hollywood parties. So why did this forgotten legend vanish? Mysteries and Scandal spotlights a la Nazimova. Tomorrow at 7:30, only on E! Fame ain't a bitch. In the 1920s, film actress Clara Bow defined the image of the Hollywood sex symbol. But in January 1931, the 25-year-old screen sensation faced her most challenging role as a witness for the prosecution. Welcome back to Mysteries and Scandals. I'm A.J. Benza. Clara's former assistant, Daisy DeVoe, was accused of stealing thousands of dollars from Clara and was charged with grand theft. DeVoe promised that if she was going down, she'd bring Clara down with her.
Daisy went public with the story of the so-called lurid details of Clara's life.
I was just a kid on the lot, but I do remember that it devastated Clara, the fact she had to go through this in court, or the fact it was costing Clara so much money.
Literally, Daisy DeVoe was on trial, but what that trial became was Clara Bow on trial.
Daisy DeVoe managed to smear Clara's name by turning the tables on the prosecution.
She got on the stand and they would say to her, why didn't you tell Clara something? Oh, she was gambling all night. Well, then the prosecution would say, well, she was gambling for a penny a point. So it would undermine it, but then Daisy DeVoe would say, but she was drunk.
The press picked it up, and the tabloids of the day picked it up, and you had these rather racy charges going on.
A newspaper is printed called The Coast Reporter, which claims that Clara Bow has slept with women, koala bears, had sex in public, and slept with her Great Dane, that she's an alcoholic and has syphilis. In 1931, for a newspaper to appear with those kind of claims, the public assumed that they had to be true, because how could you print them if they weren't true?
That was really breaking of Clara, I think. She was humiliated and hurt deeply.
It took the jury 48 hours to return a verdict. Of the 35 counts against her, Daisy DeVoe was found guilty of only one charge of grand theft.
As a result of it, Daisy was arrested, tried, and convicted, and actually spent, I don't know how long it was, a year or so in the penitentiary.
Daisy's meager jail sentence was a slap in the face to Clara after the public humiliation she suffered. And unfortunately for the 25-year-old actress, there was more shame to come.
Well, one of the rumors, again, there were many things reported on with regard to Clara, was that the entire football squad at USC were over at Clara's place.
In 1926, Clara had to become friends with the USC players, and she would invite the boys over for an occasional game of touch football. Honestly, that's really all that happened. But by 1931, with Clara's already tarnished reputation, everybody assumed the worst.
If you read certain guidebooks of Hollywood now, they will say, well, this is the spot where Clara Bow took on a team of USC Trojans, and it's unfair and it's untrue.
There was no, mass sexual scenes going on with the team.
That turned out to be a complete fallacy.
In light of all the rumors and bad press, the execs at Paramount Pictures decided 26-year-old Clara Bow was a liability.
It certainly didn't do Mother any good in terms of her health and mental state.
The embarrassment and the humiliation that came out about Clara, that people, they loved that, and they ate it up. And in the eating up, they sort of ate up Clara, too.
The feeding frenzy was too much for Clara Bow to endure. The it girl had lost it, along with the love of her fans. Clara's public image and self-esteem crumbled under the weight of scandal. Life couldn't get any worse for this fallen star, or could it? By 1933, the party was over for film goddess Clara Bow. Tinseltown's premier sex siren vaulted from obscurity to celebrity to infamy in the course of 13 years. Vicious accusations and backstabbing branded Clara damaged goods, and at the age of 28, she was finished in Hollywood.
All of the excesses of the Roaring '20s were now seen as extravagantly wasteful, and she took a lot of the blame for that. She sort of embodied her era, and therefore, when the era was over, public opinion turned against her. During all these scandals, Rex Bell, who was a cowboy star, stuck by her, and she decided, this is the man for me.
Rex Bell was someone who was on the level, but he was a very solid citizen, and in a sense, thought he could save her, I think, really, too.
When all of these scandals struck, he stood by her. He was really the only person that did. And he said, you don't need this. And he took her to a ranch in Nevada to recuperate, and then they married.
Clara sought salvation by devoting herself to her husband and home. By 1938, 33-year-old Clara and 35-year-old Rex had 2 sons. Clara was finally part of a happy family, but peace of mind still eluded her.
She had been so burned in Hollywood that she wanted privacy, and Rex wanted a career in politics, and obviously being a political wife did not allow for much privacy. So there was a rift that developed because she really wanted him home with the family.
Over the next decade, Clara cut herself off from the outside world. Her isolation began to have severe physical and mental consequences.
In 1949, she decided that all that was wrong with her was insomnia. So she went to the Institute of Living. It's a very posh clinic in Connecticut. She went there to try and figure out why she couldn't sleep. And of course, the reason she couldn't sleep was what had happened to her in her childhood.
She was gone for a year. We know that Institute of Living, she went through shock treatment.
And Clara's marriage to Rex also had its ups and downs. Clara felt abandoned by her career-minded husband. She needed him to give her the constant attention and validation she once got from Hollywood and her fans.
It's almost a feminist parable in a way. It's her work that kept her going. And once she didn't have her work anymore, she lost her sense of self. She lost her identity.
In 1950, 45-year-old Clara moved back to Los Angeles to be near a therapist. Her estranged husband and 2 sons remained in Nevada. Clara's father, Robert Bow, the man who abused her as a child, moved in with Clara and lived with her until his death in 1959. Clara's husband, Rex, died 3 years later.
For the rest of her life, she stayed home. She had a live-in nurse, and her sons would come and visit her.
She lived a very decent life there, right up to her passing. Just passed away of a heart attack all of a sudden, without any real showing of heart problem.
Clara Bow died on September 26, 1965, supposedly while she was watching the 1929 Western The Virginian on TV. The picture starred Gary Cooper and was directed by Victor Fleming, two men from Clara's past. At age 60, Clara was finally laid to rest here at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles, right beside her husband, Rex. She's remembered by her son, Rex Jr.
I think that Mother was so outgoing, so friendly, really didn't look for the bad side of people, and didn't all through her life. She was a mother to my brother and myself, and a very good mother.
No one stands out to me more in my memory and my admiration than Clara Bow.
Her genuineness, her depth of feeling, her ability to communicate, it's felt, and it's still very powerful today.
And I think that the fact that she survived and she was able to live a full life and have a family that loved her and maintain her independence and end up financially secure. In a way, she triumphed over Hollywood.
Like it or not, Clara Bow's turbulent career was the model for so many actresses who followed. Jean Harlow, Marilyn Monroe, and Jane Mansfield also had to bear the blessing and the curse of being a Hollywood sex symbol. And it's certainly no job for the weary. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time we take a stroll down the flip side of the Walk of Fame. Times are changing in Tinseltown. I'm A.J. Benza, host of Mysteries and Scandals. Beginning Monday, August 2nd, join me at our new time, 8:30 p.m., weeknights, right here on E!